Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments. Welcome to part one of my 16,000 subscriber Q&A series, and thank you for joining me. We do have a lot of ground to cover, a lot of great questions to answer, so we're going to dive right in. So first question, and this pertains to video game grading. I recently bought some very good condition Super Nintendo games, complete in box, for a great price. I also think the market's in a little bit of a bubble, but I would like to get them graded to maximize my return on investment. Any thoughts on the best company to do that with? Some of the games include Secret of Mana, Final Fantasy 2 and 3, and A Link to the Past. Now that's the first part of your question. So I do want to answer that in full before we go forward because there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, Secret of Mana, Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 3, A Link to the Past are all great Super Nintendo games, but they are anything but rare. They are in demand, but I want to assure you the production run for all of these games was in the millions of units produced. Now, you state that these are all complete in the box and they are all in very good condition. The only way that I would advise you to get these graded were, number one, if these were factory sealed in excellent to near mint condition, this wouldn't even be a conversation. I would tell you just to go and get them graded. That wouldn't be an issue. The fact is, though, if these particular games are not in excellent, near mint, almost immaculate condition, being that they're complete in the box, I would tell you to not bother with grading. All is what you're going to be doing is paying an exorbitant grading fee, tying up your money for 6 months to send the game out to get graded, hoping that it comes back in X number of grade so that you can maximize the return on your investment. Most collectors that are going to want these games complete in box, they're probably going to want to play them. They're probably going to want to interact with them in some way. As a result, again, unless these items are in absolute immaculate condition, I would not bother with grading. Now, you do ask, what are my thoughts on the best company to do that with? Well, there are 3 video game grading companies at present time that all have top tier status. And I know this is going to probably surprise some of you, but those 3 companies are CGC, VGA, and yes, Wata Games, which is now owned by the Collectors Universe. Would I go with Wata Games? In all honesty, no, I would not, due to ethics, due to the way that they came in and allegedly manipulated the graded video game market. So I would tell you, if it was me, I would probably want to go with either CGC or VGA. Now remember, VGA makes custom cases, so they can grade pretty much anything from consoles to accessories to, of course, video games, to also even Nintendo Amiibo, which is going to tie in to the next part of your question here. You go on this date. I also got a TurboGrafx 16. Love that video game system. And I also got some accessories with that as well. Do people get consoles and accessories graded? Here again, if they were in factory sealed condition, I would tell you yes, get them graded. If they're loose or even mint in the box, most people are probably going to want to play the TurboGrafx 16, and they're going to want to use those accessories. So I would not tell you to waste money on the grading fees, because if you send an item, even if it's in immaculate condition, if it has been opened and used just once, if you send it to VGA, they're going to grade it with a qualified label, meaning it's going to stay qualified on it. In my opinion, unless the item is extremely rare or scarce, I would not bother getting items like this graded. Now, to be fair, if you go to the flea market next Saturday and you find a loose copy of Stadium Events that's in fairly good to excellent condition, by all means, get that particular item graded, because that particular item is considered uncommon, scarce, possibly rare on the secondary market. But for items like this, if they're just complete in the box, again, I wouldn't bother too much with grading. Just my advice. Next question. Sean, congrats on the milestone. My question is, with collectibles and grading, Having received so much attention and a gain in popularity during the COVID pandemic, have we reached a point where there is no longer organic collectibility with anything produced because people have become too smart and holding on to whatever they get their hands on to either grade or put away? Another way to ask, can today's collectibles have long-term potential if nobody actually uses and or consumes them? Well, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. There's always going to be those few items that slip through the proverbial cracks. Now, here's the problem with that mentality, and this is what a large portion of the Pokemon community doesn't understand. If you're buying everything and you're putting it away factory sealed, hoping that one day it goes up in value, if you're buying 20 products a year and only 4 go up in value, those particular 4 items that go up in value have to go up in value exponentially to outpace the overall aggregate cost that you spent to hold all of those 20 items for X number of years in factory sealed condition, because you got to understand the time value of money and the opportunity cost of tying up your money in illiquid speculative assets. This is why, in a lot of cases going forward, you would be better off putting the majority of your funds, of your money, in a well-diversified portfolio or index-based funds, and then just playing with like 20 or 30% of it. If you want to put it in Pokemon, if you want to put it in Magic the Gathering, if you want to put it in something crazy, whatever it is, you do you. But in most cases, I've said this before, we're at the pinnacle peak where everybody is hoarding this stuff. And thanks to social media, thanks to YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, everybody having a smartphone, I hate to say this, but if you're a collector, even if you're in just finance in general, if you scroll through your YouTube feed, if you scroll through Facebook, you're bound to see social media influencers pumping a lot of this stuff up, calling it an investment. Will some of those items be worth money in the future? Absolutely. I'm here to say yes, a resounding yes. But you're not going to know which ones. So is catching them all a valid strategy in the year 2024? To use the tagline from Pokemon, the answer is no. It's going to lead to a lesser return across the board going forward. That is what I try to teach people. Now, there's another way to play this. If you get in my DeLorean time machine and we go back to the 1980s and the early 1990s, when everybody was starting to become obsessed with video games, with Nintendo, Sega. In the 1990s, you had Sega, Nintendo, TurboGrafx-16 battling it out. Then you had a lot of other companies coming out with interesting concepts like multimedia systems from 3DO, CD Interactive. Then you had the Neo Geo, Atari Jaguar, all these unique systems. If we would go back to that particular time frame, do you know what I would tell you to go after? Vintage video game advertising. Nobody really bothered to appreciate or save a lot of that vintage advertising. This is why if you go on eBay, even certain auction houses are starting to cater to this market. You can see like a World of Nintendo vintage advertising sign or display sell for thousands of dollars. The reason that's happening is through scarcity and supply and demand. A lot of people back then didn't bother to save this stuff. That's why it's worth money today. So what does this have to do with the question you asked? If you think different, you may be able to determine or come up with opportunities that other people don't see at present time. Now you have to be careful here because I'm sure that some of you out there are going to go crazy and you're going to become hoarders. I don't want you to become a hoarder. I just want you to think intelligently and look at certain items at present time that aren't being hoarded in mass. That's where the opportunity exists. But you have to be aware it may not go the way that you want it to go. For instance, case in point, if we go back to the 1970s and 80s, when Star Wars came out. Star Wars was king. Then you had Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe, Transformers. You had all of these other toy properties that were being produced by Hasbro, Kenner, whoever it was, Mattel. They were all coming onto the scene. Well, there were people back then, every kid probably had Star Wars or Masters of the Universe, bed sheets and pillowcases and matching comforters. Those particular items were bought, but they weren't collected. Now today, if you would have put some of that stuff away and held it till the year 2024, it would not be worth that much. So if you would have applied this concept back in the 1980s in that manner that I just spoke of, you probably would have lost money more than made money. However, if you would have hoarded vintage video game advertising, you would have been okay. Because today, a lot of those original pieces are now selling for thousands of dollars on the open market. Now, one word of advice. If you do get into investing in vintage video game advertising, you have to be very careful. Remember, there's no third-party grading that exists in that market. So if you're going to go after pieces, you got to make sure they're 100% original. They're not restored in any manner. They're not fantasy pieces. They're not reproductions, heaven forbid. So you really have to get a feel of the pulse of that market and know exactly what you are doing if you're going to try to invest in that market across the board. But I do still see a lot of opportunity in the market for vintage video game advertising, just like if we get in my DeLorean time machine and we go back to the 1940s or 50s, nobody was saving at that time. Well, I shouldn't say no one. Very few individuals were saving original, authentic pieces of soda pop advertising, whether it be Dr. Pepper, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, of course, or any of the other off-brands. Well, today, you log on to Morphy's auctions, you can see some of those pieces selling for thousands upon thousands of dollars. I have some of those pieces on display in my own house because everyone back then, very few people fought to save those particular items for the long term. So if you learn to think different, you can make money in these markets. Just to sum this up, just be careful that you don't become a hoarder in the process. Next question. Sean, congratulations on 16,000 subscribers. How do you look at investing in first edition and or signed books, including specialty publishers like Easton and Franklin? Okay, full disclosure. I do like original first edition books, meaning if you grew up, if you went to high school, junior high school, maybe even college, and you have a book that you love, that falls into the category of classic literature, or it's pretty much a classic book that pretty much almost everybody has heard of, if that's your thing, by all means, go after and try to get a first edition copy of that book in the best condition that you can afford. Now, that out of the way, I do not like a lot of the specialty publishers that are coming into this space. I do not like the modern market for first edition books and reproduction books, stuff that a lot of these companies are putting out. That is mass-produced scarcity. Even if you come to me and you say, Sean, you don't understand, Stephen King is my favorite author of all time. I was at a bookstore the other day and they had a first edition copy of his latest release, whatever that is. I don't know at present time. But I would tell you, be very careful because everybody knows that first edition books have value and a lot of people are probably buying that particular item, hoarding it and storing it away in near mint or better condition, which if you know grading of books, it's actually very fine or better condition. They're storing that away and waiting for the day that it becomes valuable. So there's going to be much more first edition copies on the open market for a lot of modern releases going forward than there were back in the 80s, back in the 70s, heaven forbid, back in the 60s or prior. This is why if you look up a book like F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, which is my favorite book of all time, you will see that if you have a first edition copy, it is now, for the most part, if it's in any type of collectible condition, it is worth a minimum of several thousands of dollars all the way up to tens of thousands of dollars. So what I will tell you is, again, the money is more in the vintage and antique stuff. It's not in the modern era stuff. So you have to be very careful if that's what you're going after, because mass-produced scarcity exists in book publishing as well, unfortunately. Next question. Sean, what sort of catalyst could possibly come that would inflate the values of collectibles back up to all-time highs? I understand that some things will never recover, but I am having a hard time wrapping my head around what sort of event would have to happen to cause us to return to the type of money that was pumped in the collectibles during 2020 and 2021. Okay, guys, full disclosure here. As we go further out into the unknown future, and right now we're in 2024, next year, spoiler alert, it's going to be 2025. Year after that, spoiler alert, it's going to be 2026. You guys are going to have to learn to get over what happened in 2020 and 2021. It is an abnormal blip on the radar, meaning it is a statistical anomaly what happened during that time period. That's why if you go back, you watch any of my videos during that time period, I was warning you guys and telling you, sell into the hype. I remember one of the first videos I did that went viral on this channel was the video that I released entitled "Do Not Invest in Marvel Trading Cards." And I had people coming into the comment section, people emailing me, telling me, Sean, in a couple of years, you are dead wrong. This market is going to be as popular as vintage comic books. And I couldn't stop laughing at those individuals. Today, go look at the gains, go look at the massive losses that occurred in the Marvel trading card market. Are there certain cards out there that still have value? Yes, but they are nowhere near their 2020 or 2021 highs. You guys have got to get those years out of your lexicon. If you're going to even analyze the antiques and collectibles trade properly, if we're looking back and we're doing a study on the value of rare coins or vintage comic books or, heaven forbid, luxury watches, let's pick on that category, and we see the prices that were paid during 2020 and 2021, should we even include them in our aggregate average? It's going to skew the average. It's just like what happened with some of the comic books of that time. I remember people were paying record prices for certain books where I was just sitting here scratching my head. We have to get past that. But that's really not your question. What your question is, what could happen that could cause us to get back to those particular high prices again? Well, it's quite simple. Number one, interest rates would have to be almost at historic low levels because that's what caused an influx of money to flow into the antiques and collectibles trade and other alternate asset classes. If we're looking at Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, even gold and silver, because borrowing money was at a record low price. So the cost of money supply was very low. People would take that money and they would invest it in items or commodities where they think they can get an investable return due to the fact that the cost to borrow money was at an all-time low. Another thing that would have to happen is the government would then have to do something stupid like give everybody free money. And again, if you were on the low end during the pandemic, you got 3 checks for $1,200 a piece. If you were somebody who owned a business and you signed up to get a free PPP loan that you never had to pay back, hell, I know people that got up to $500,000 they never had to pay back. I had one guy that put it all in high-end comic books. I had another guy that was going to the market buying luxury watches like you wouldn't believe. Because remember, guys, I'm a consultant in the antiques and collectibles trade. So I saw both ends. It was insane. The third thing that would have to happen, in my opinion, it would have to be another event like the pandemic where people were either stuck indoors or people couldn't go about their daily routine like they could normally. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, during the pandemic, people were stuck indoors and there was a little bit of fear there. People didn't know how this was going to play out. They didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know if their family, friends, or even themselves was going to get sick. So as a result, they tended to focus on things that they were nostalgic for, things that made them feel some level of happiness, some level of joy. This is why video games, collectibles, comic books, collectible card games, sports cards, a lot of things that people found joy in, this is why those particular markets shot to the stratosphere. To use this as an example, coin prices hit highs during this particular time as well, but not as high as pop culture collectibles. Because remember, guys, when we look at the antiques and collectibles trade, it's a continuum. Antiques are rooted more in history. Pop culture collectibles are rooted in nostalgia. What do people tend to gravitate towards when they're stuck inside or they're feeling a little bit of fear and anxiety? They tend to gravitate towards things that make them feel better, things that they know, things that they're familiar with. That's usually always on the collectible side of the equation. So that's really what it's going to take for us to get back there. If that doesn't happen again, which in most cases it probably won't, unless there's another pandemic coming that I'm not aware of at present time. But if that doesn't happen, you guys need to get the years 2020 and 2021 out of your head. Because even me, as we go forward into the future, when I do an analysis on a collectible market for certain individuals that come to me and pay me to do this, I tell them, hey, these are certain prices that were achieved during the COVID pandemic collectible boom. You may want to use caution. If you're involved in any of those markets, don't pay anywhere near these high prices. This is a blip on the radar. It is a black swan event. So that's my answer to you. Most likely, we will hopefully never, ever get there. Now, that doesn't mean certain markets may not trend up towards those high prices again. Speculative bubbles are the name of the game in the antiques and collectibles trade. I want to make that very clear. Whenever we talk about alternate asset investing, speculative bubbles is what causes a lot of these markets to pop. Whether it's Beanie Babies, Funko Pops, comic books, even rare coins, even luxury watches, even Hermes Birkin bags. You can make a lot of money if you sell into the hype. Full disclosure, during the years that we had that pandemic boom, mainly, as you state in your question, the year 2020 and 2021, I made a shit ton of money just selling off common as day collectibles. Whether they were used video games, whether they were Pokemon cards, whether they were comic books, whatever it was, I made a shit ton of money during that time. So I would love for us to go back in this particular direction. I just don't see it happening anytime soon, guys. You guys got to learn that this is now the new normal going forward. Now, if the economy hits a recession and the Fed starts cutting interest rates, that's when I think after that recession ends, that's where there'll be more of a demand for antiques and collectibles. Because again, as interest rates decrease, there seems to be more of a demand in alternate asset classes. Next question. Sean, I'm wondering about the cosmetic perfume industry. There are vintage, discontinued, restricted perfumes with a huge secondary market and a lot of speculation going on. What are your thoughts? Okay, I do not like this particular market. It is a very niche market. There is a little bit of regulation in this market. I'm not going to go into that in this video, but just be very careful if you're speculating in perfumes or any of these particular niche markets. It's the same reason why I do have a whiskey video that is going to be premiering at some point. Hopefully I can get it out in the next year. It's stuck in pre-production hell at present time, but I am working on it. If we look at whiskey, whiskey is similar to wine. Whiskey is similar to a lot of these niche markets that do have some regulation. You have to be very careful if you are investing in markets like this. There are also very few auction companies that cater to these markets. So usually you are on your own if you invest in something like a rare perfume. And even if people are willing to pay a premium for it, you still have to seek those individuals out. I do not recommend that most people get involved in this market unless you truly have a passion for it or you're just one of those individuals where this is your thing, this is really what you want to do, you want to get involved in this, then you do you. I do not recommend this market, though, for the average collector. I don't even recommend the average collector learn this market, again, unless they have a passion for it and they understand the risks. Best advice I can give you. Next question. Sean, in your years of studying the collectibles market, have you noticed if there's a specific time of the year when one can get the best bargains for buying collectibles, especially comic books? The answer is yes. And now that you watched this video for close to 26 minutes, I'm going to tell you how this plays out. First, the best time to buy a lot of antiques and collectibles, depending on the market, it always depends on the market, how the market is trending at any given time, is always around the holiday season. When we get into right after Thanksgiving, going all the way up and including New Year's Day, that is usually the best time to buy certain collectibles, especially pop culture collectibles, because collectors in general at that particular point in time are usually distracted in most cases. If you have a family, you have a wife and kids, you're not going to be able in most cases to follow every single comic book auction or toy auction to come along during that time frame, because you're going to be busy doing holiday stuff, going to parties, family gatherings, going out with your wife shopping, whatever it is. You're probably going to be busy. So in my opinion, if you can identify certain items that are coming up for auction that you want, if you look at those auctions, you will sometimes see a 10 to 20% variance in a lower price that you can get some of those particular items for during this time frame. Now, if you really want to know the secret, if you're an antique entrepreneur out there, you're somebody that wants to go into the market and buy antiques, believe it or not, New Year's Day used to be the best day ever to go to auctions, because most people are out there celebrating. They got the day off. They're sitting at home eating their, what is it, pork and sauerkraut with mashed potatoes, watching the Mummers Parade. They're not going to an antique auction. So by and large, that time of year and those auctions were always the best to get items at a little bit of a discount compared to what they sell for the rest of the year. Now, you also are probably going to be wondering then, well, Sean, when's the best time to sell some of my collectibles? If it's items that are $2,000 or less in value, I will tell you a trick here. Usually it's right around tax season. Tax season is when a lot of the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters get a refund. And because they're Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters that have given the IRS free money for a full year, usually when they get that check back, they tend to spend it because they're not financially intelligent people. And let me explain why. Financially intelligent people don't give the IRS a free loan for 365 days a year. Case in point, when I go to file my taxes this year, I will wait to the very last minute because chances are I probably owe Uncle Sam about $5,000 to $10,000 because I'm not somebody that gives Uncle Sam a free loan. So that's a secret. If you have items of a collectible nature that are in demand, you have to still look at market trends. But if you have items of a pop culture nature that are in demand, right around tax season is the best time to unload them if they are valued at less than $2,000. Now, I know what you're going to ask. Why less than $2,000? Because most Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters that are giving Uncle Sam a free loan, you can tell that I'm triggered by this question, the way that I'm answering, usually are not in a financial situation where they have a lot of money. So that's pretty much the limit or the max that they can spend on collectibles at any given time. I do not mean to insult anyone with that answer. But if you are consistently getting a tax refund from Uncle Sam year after year, with few exceptions, you, my friend, are an idiot because you are giving the government a free loan that they are not paying you any interest on that money. They're just getting free money to utilize for 365 days, and then you get a refund and you think, this is great. I got $1,900 back. No, you didn't. You got $1,900 of your own money sent to you from the government that you had to wait on. It makes no sense to me. So that concludes part 1 of the 16,000 subscriber Q&A series. Again, guys, please don't chew me up in the comments. I'm not trying to offend anybody. Part 2 will be uploaded soon. Thank you for all your questions, and let me know what you think in the comment section below.